cars, over 3,000 pounds of metal and glass. Some cars can reach speeds upwards of 200 miles per hour. Now, just imagine the horrific damage that a car, even one moving at a slow speed, can do to a frail human body. 525 feet, just 1/10 a mile. Doesn't really sound all that far, now does it? Well, what if you're being dragged underneath the car, being driven by your enraged fiancé for that entire distance? Yeah, kind of recontextualizes things a bit, doesn't it? But to figure out exactly how we've arrived at this tragic point of events, we have to go back in time. So let's set the scene. We're in the United Kingdom in May of the year 2022, and Alice Woods is a brilliant and beautiful 21-year-old woman from Staffordshire. Alice's early life was a happy one, growing up with two brothers and both parents present in the home. However, during her youth, her parents would divorce, with custody eventually being split between her mother and father. From day one, it was obvious that Alice was highly intelligent, with her excelling at pretty much any academic venture she undertook. Alice was also a bit of a tomboy though, and with this came a natural love for and inclination towards wildlife, leading her in the direction of becoming a veterinarian. So after finishing with school, the young woman would begin her levels, once again excelling. And after completing her A-levels, Alice would enroll at Manchester University, and it was here where she began her quest for a degree in philosophy and ethics, something that becomes darkly ironic when you know the whole tragic story. Alice would never actually end up finishing this degree, but she took her work very seriously nonetheless, achieving very high marks, and eventually her hard work would pay off when she was offered a scholarship to study for a master's degree at Cambridge. By all accounts, Alice was living a fairly blessed life, one that many people would be highly envious of. However, considering what happened, it seems that Alice didn't appreciate all of this privilege. In March of the year 2022, most of the world went into lockdown. This was a very depressing and isolating time for many people. A lonely time, but not necessarily for Alice. You see, that very month she would meet Ryan Watson, a 24-year-old man who would go on to become her boyfriend. Perhaps because of the strict isolation imposed upon them, the two became incredibly close very fast, and just months after initially meeting, the two young adults would become engaged. I'm sure that sounds quite ridiculous to many people watching this, and perhaps a big red flag, but I think that most of us can remember just how it felt to be in your first real serious relationship. After all, passion can be a great thing, but there's no denying that it burns bright. That first relationship can be very intense, in both good and bad ways. Unfortunately, all too often, that burning passion can turn to violence, and as we all know, violence can quickly turn deadly. Add alcohol and an unhealthy dose of jealousy into the situation, and you have a catastrophe just waiting to happen. And happen it did. In the year 2021, the young couple made the decision to buy a home together. After receiving some financial assistance from their parents, the two were able to purchase a nice home in Cheshire. Around the same period of time, Ryan began working at a charity organization known as Headway. Ryan sought out a job at a charity in particular because he wanted to make a positive impact upon the world, and by all accounts he was extremely popular and well liked at his workplace, maintaining a number of friendships with his co-workers. In May of the year 2022, Ryan, along with some of his colleagues, was invited to attend a birthday party for another well-liked member of staff. The party was to be held at the Victoria's Lounge Bar in Hanley. Little did Ryan know this was to be the last night of his young life. Being the courteous and caring partner that he was, Ryan asked Alice if she'd like to attend the party as his guest. And so, on the night of the event, the two got dressed up in their very best and made their way over to the pub. Right off the bat, things seemed to be going very well, and the couple was later spotted on CCTV apparently enjoying themselves. However, this wouldn't last, and at least according to Alice, it wouldn't be long before things took a turn for the worse. During the festivities, Ryan was busy being the social butterfly that he was, mingling, laughing, and joking with other attendees. Unfortunately, according to several witnesses, Alice didn't seem to be too thrilled about the amount of attention Ryan was receiving, and especially about the amount that he was giving to others, in particular to other women. Once again, jealousy was rearing its ugly head. Alice simply couldn't stand the sight of Ryan being friendly to women other than herself. In particular, Alice would later claim that Ryan made a connection with a woman named Tiffany that left her feeling ignored and snubbed. Other guests at the party would go on to state in court that there was a blatant and obvious tension between the young couple that anyone could pick up on. Many said that Alice was giving off a very hostile vibe, and if they attempted to converse with her, they would be met with a few terse words, followed by a very uncomfortable silence. It was blatantly clear to everyone that Alice's attention was focused exclusively upon Ryan. Eventually, the young couple would decide to pack it in and call it a night. Once again, CCTV picked up the couple as they were walking towards their vehicle. You can only imagine the types of angry thoughts that were swirling around in both of their heads at this point. I assume that Ryan felt embarrassed of the childish behavior of his partner in front of his co-workers, and Alice was still stewing with jealousy and resentment. Once inside the vehicle, the two would begin a heated argument that would eventually turn deadly. Alice would later claim that it was actually Ryan who was angry at her, having accused her of flirting with other men. However, the evidence would seem to contradict this. The couple is once again captured on CCTV as they pull up in their car to their shared home. As the two young lovers are exiting the vehicle, Alice can be seen running to her own car, a Ford Fiesta, which is parked in the drive, and despite her blood alcohol level being over 3 times the legal limit, Alice fires up the engine and begins reversing towards Ryan, with the whole scene once again being captured on CCTV. From this initial attempt to run him over in cold blood, Ryan is knocked a bit off balance. Alice, clearly in a towering fury at this point, attempts her crime yet again, this time succeeding in knocking Ryan onto the hood of her vehicle. Ryan would recover and get up from the second murder attempt, only to have his partner try to run him over yet again, and unfortunately the old saying held true. For Alice, the third time was the charm. Ryan was bowled over, becoming trapped underneath the 2,000-pound vehicle, and with Ryan, a man she had sworn to marry, still trapped underneath, Alice proceeded to drive the car forward for a total of 525 feet, dragging her fiancé's body along the pavement as she went. Obviously, Ryan would suffer extensive injuries from this blatant and unprovoked attack. Following the completion of her foul deed, Alice proceeded to flee from her vehicle, running over to a nearby neighbor's home and knocking upon the door. The neighbor opened his front door, only to find Alice standing there and begging for him to call an ambulance. It's likely that the possible consequences for her deplorable actions had finally begun to sink in, and Alice was on the sheer edge of full-blown panic. What you're about to hear and see is a snippet of that neighbor's call to the authorities, as well as body cam footage of Alice being arrested on suspicion of murder.
Said it was an accident. I came down to have a look and there was no pulse. About 10 minutes ago, there was a young lady in our house. She walked outside now with us, and she said to my wife and myself that she's the driver. They had an argument, and she drove over him.
Right, okay, so Alice, based on the circumstances that we found out already, okay, I'm going to arrest you on... No, listen to me, okay, I'm going to arrest you on suspicion of murder, okay, so you don't have to say anything, but behind your fence, you don't mention now, something later on in court. Anything you do to me, we never do you understand?
When the authorities had arrived and examined the scene, they located Ryan's deceased body still laying prone upon the road. Tragically, he was pronounced dead at the scene, and Alice would be formally charged with the cold-blooded murder of her fiancé. The trial began in 2023, and throughout the proceedings, Alice claimed that she never meant to run over Ryan, and the whole thing had just been a kind of tragic accident, and the defense actually managed to produce a so-called expert to testify to this effect. However, other experts brought forward by the prosecution claimed the opposite, stating that Ryan could not be considered an unexpected hazard due to the fact that Alice had driven straight at him numerous times. During the trial, Alice attempted to convince the jury that it was Ryan who was the one who was actually angry that night, as though someone who gets angry deserves to be run over. The prosecution, however, simply pointed out how all of the available evidence strongly discredited this claim. Eventually, the jury rejected the manslaughter plea brought forward by Alice's lawyer, finding her guilty of murder, and on February 2nd, 2024, she was handed a life sentence with a minimum of 18 years to be served.